What we want to do, and there's a trap here, you see. You're on benefits, you go back to work, you work more than 16 hours a week, the tax kicks in, you may as well stay on benefits. There is a terrible trap.
So hence the rationale to raise the tax threshold.
Absolutely.
That 100 billion, you say, is that from young... Do you say that number's from young people not working? So that's the whole
benefits
on
bill.
benefits.
However, since the pandemic, a growing number of young people are saying they've got all sorts of psychological problems, but they're also not incentivised to go to work. We want to get people back to work.
I understand that. So the 50 billion, where will that money come from?
A lot of it will come from the racket that is going on. The government has been creating money, particularly during the pandemic. That money goes into the system, it goes into banks, the banks lodge it with the Bank of England, the Bank of England pay them interest on it. It's a racket.
The BBC are liars, and after years of relentless attacks on Nigel Farage, it has become abundantly clear that he no longer intends to tolerate this. He is ready to stand up for his beliefs and confront their absurd stupidity. Moving from the presidential election to the real chaos in the Starmer government, Nigel Farage demonstrated one important truth with amazing clarity to journalists. They do not hear him and completely ignore the real problems that concern our country. From Donald Trump to anyone who dares to challenge the corrupt plans of big banks and elites, the media has shown that they are willing to do anything to destroy the reputations of individuals. They don't just label their opponents, they continue their relentless attacks without stopping at anything. But despite this, Nigel retains amazing composure and skillfully answers the hypocritical questions of journalists. If this can be called journalism at all, then it seems that it has long lost its essence.
Billion to fill. And that, we've spoken to the IFS, or taken a look at the IFS, looking at your proposals for changing the Bank of England's function. And that is a very difficult and long process. That is very technical. That would not happen immediately.
Well, no other central bank in the world does this. This is a complete racket with the banks. And interestingly, you know, Paul Tucker, a former Deputy Governor of the Bank of England, fully endorses our plan, as do a growing number of economists. But look, I'm going to launch... And by the way, I won't call it a manifesto, because the word association with manifesto is lie. I'm going to launch our contract on Monday, where I'll lay out all of the costings of our plans. All I can tell you is what we're doing is bold.
During Nagi Muncenti's interview with her partner Charlie State for the BBC and the independent newspaper Brightbulb, attentive viewers could not help but notice the obvious bias that caught their eye. The questions and the tone of the reports created the feeling that the entire program had been planned with the sole purpose of presenting Nigel as an aloof leader, unable to communicate normally. At the same time, Britain's pressing problems and the viable solutions he proposed remained in the shadows, as if they simply did not exist. Nevertheless, Nigel has shown incredible resilience in raising crucial issues for the younger generation trapped by the ruthless tax system. His attempts to draw attention to the problems of working citizens who cannot save money or achieve financial growth due to the unbearable burden of two-tier taxation were completely ignored.
The front page of Reform website, as it stands, and I know it's not a manifesto at this stage, I'm not quite sure, do you call it a pledge? I can't remember.
No, a contract.
A contract.
This is what we will campaign
The contract, it says you'll set out your reforms in the first 100 days, is what it says. And you then go to say it's produced with advice from independent economists, think tanks and advisors. And a moment ago you said you're not about conformity. That just sounds like everybody else. Every other political party would say, we talk to independent advisors, we talk to think tanks. You just sound like everyone else.
I've been called many things over the years, but not like everybody else.
Well, no, I'm quoting from from Reform. That's what you said. It doesn't sound radical. That just sounds like you do the same as other people. You talk to think tanks.
I've just outlined some very radical proposals. Equally, we don't think anybody should pay inheritance tax until the estate is worth £2 million. We want to lift the VAT threshold to help small businesses. I promise you, what's coming on Monday is very...
Munchi, instead of focusing on the real issues, switched the conversation, asking him persistent questions about how he was going to finance his policies and fulfill his promises if he became Prime Minister. Her focus on large financial indicators looked like it was aimed at undermining his credibility, rather than discussing proposed solutions. This caused the audience to ask a lot of questions. Was this really an impartial interview or a pre-planned attempt to turn public opinion against him? The conversation struck me as a scenario overshadowing the real debates and decisions that are so necessary for Britain's future. The whole spectacle left the feeling that the country's real problems were buried under a layer of manipulation and bias.
Very different.
You have a freedom, and you must recognise this, given what you previously said about how few MPs, even you, think you will get relative to the Parliament. It could be a big jump for you as a party, but relative to the Parliament.
Well, we'll see.
It gives you a freedom to say stuff, doesn't it? That you're not going to have to back this up and say we couldn't do it.
What I'm saying is this. We have a Labour Party that's won already. The election is over. We all know that. Your viewers all know that. Their thinking on economics, on all of the key issues of our lives, is actually remarkably similar to the Conservative Party. I'm arguing that for democracy to work, governments need to be challenged. And I think I'm in a far better position to do that than either Ed Davey from the Lib Dems, and Rishi Sunak won't be there. But the Tories are so divided, they don't stand for anything.
For those who watched the interview, it was impossible not to notice the obvious bias that caught their eye. Farage raised crucial questions about young people trapped in the ruthless state tax system who can neither save money nor achieve financial stability. However, Munchetti, as if ignoring his concerns, quickly switched the discussion to how Farage was going to finance his policies, completely bypassing the systemic problems he had pointed out. This caused confusion. Was it honest journalism or an attempt to undermine Farage's authority? At this point, it became quite obvious that the BBC was following a certain line in its approach to the interview, and this was a deliberate attempt to undermine Nigel Farage's reputation. Earlier, Farage, who became a victim of what he called corrupt establishment-supporting media, reacted ironically to Charlie's words. The State Department tried to undermine his credibility. This remark clearly angered Farage, but instead of responding impulsively, he showed the amazing resilience that is so necessary in politics. Drawing on his experience, he maintained his composure and confidently repeated his policy, emphasizing his commitment to solving Britain's pressing problems if elected. As Keir Starmer once said, political debates are often tough, and Farage has shown that he is ready to defend his point of view with full determination. Farage emphatically emphasized that his words were no different from those of others, and this was a real challenge for all those who tried to discredit him.
We are completely in the grip of big corporate businesses. That's who the politicians listen to. I know that from 20 years in the European Parliament. There are 5.5 million people out there, men and women, running small businesses, acting as sole traders, that frankly are having the most difficult time. I'm on their side, and I'll fight for them.
Our time is short. Can I ask you about your comments about Rishi Sunak? And I think I'm quoting you right to say that you said about him, this is following D-Day.
Yeah.
So to put it in context, that was the moment when he left early and has been criticised. So you said he doesn't understand our culture.
Despite the fact that many might try to challenge Nigel Farage in his answers and political connections with figures such as Rishi Sunak, he confidently stated the obvious. Sunak was a catastrophically ineffective Prime Minister. The problem is not only that Rishi's past is completely incompatible with the experience of the working class, which strives for a better life, but also that they continue to use this phrase, ignoring the real needs of the people. It is important to note that this has been said more than once in the context of Starmer, but many forget that you cannot constantly pursue bad policies just to stay afloat. In fact, they just don't care, and Keir Starmer obviously has a mind and understands perfectly well what decisions he makes. And another absurd and disgusting decision that you've probably heard about is that he forced the entire Labour Party to vote against an investigation into a gang of rapists in the UK. At that moment, it became quite clear that nothing they were trying to do had worked, and Naga Munchetti, realising this, decided to change the subject.
He doesn't know where the centre ground of opinion in this country is. Look, Rishi is Winchester College, Oxford University, Goldman Sachs. He has no connection with working people in this country at all, to whom, by the way, what happened 80 years ago is something to be immensely proud of. And the point of and I was there voluntarily, I wanted to be there. The point of it was to honour those last remaining remnants of that generation that did those remarkable
Can I be clear? You're saying his previous job means he doesn't understand the culture. I mean, you were a trader yourself, weren't you?
Yeah, I wasn't at Goldman Sachs working in a back
To
room.
most people out there, that won't make much difference.
I can assure you, I get on with people.
I'm not sure I understand the difference.
I get on with people of all backgrounds, all classes. Rishi Sunak lives in this very, very narrow little world.
But what is even more alarming is that other news and independent media outlets have also faced clear bias from the BBC, which has raised a storm of unanswered questions. GB News officials have repeatedly pointed out the blatant lies and transparent manipulations that were shamelessly used during the Prime Minister's debates. The real shock was that Channel 4, which has often been heavily criticised for its hypocrisy in presenting distorted stories, dismissed the grooming scandal as false and unfounded accusations. This discovery further reinforces the view that trusting the mainstream media is a dangerous game full of risks. Nowadays, more than ever, they cannot hide their deceptive practices, exposing not only their lies, but also the stories they have imposed on society over the years. Due to their inability to maintain self-confidence, it is becoming increasingly clear that the media no longer serves people, but only their own interests and the interests of their masters. This causes anger and frustration among those who yearn for truth and justice, but that doesn't mean that Nigel didn't try to expose them in the most drastic way, with a determination that inspires and commands respect. What do you think about this video? Share your thoughts in the comments. See you later.